everybody, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy Podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll of valleyindy.org. That's a one-person nonprofit news site covering Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour. That intro music, by the way, is The Bad Slugs. The song is called Ride the Dinosaur. The lead singer is Ken Dixon, a political commentator with Hearst, Connecticut. All right, this week features an interview with Dan Barrett. He is the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union here in Connecticut. I'm talking to him because a free speech issue popped up in Derby recently. But before I begin, I just want to read an important message about how you can help your neighbors here in the Valley. COVID-19 has changed life as we know it, and the Valley needs your help now more than ever. The region's health and human service providers face unprecedented challenges in meeting the needs of those affected by this pandemic. Some organizations are even at risk at closing their doors. You can make a difference right here in our community by joining with others in 3 ways. Give directly to Valley nonprofits, participate in the Valley United Way annual campaign, or support the Valley COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund. Visit valleyfoundation.org to learn more. Okay, so like I said, this episode is about a free speech issue in Derby. The quick summary is as follows. A resident repeatedly criticized Derby government officials and some policy, and was advised by the city's lawyer that legal action could be taken against her. On the face of it, that struck me as heavy-handed, I'll admit, and questionable, under the First Amendment. But at the end of the day, what do I know? I'm one guy who runs a news site in the Valley somehow. I barely graduated high school. So I called up the American Civil Liberties Union to get their take on it. Their lawyers have a much better understanding of this kind of stuff than I do. I also talked to this attorney, Dan Barrett, about big picture stuff. For years now, elected officials and public employees have contacted me privately to complain and pressure me about comments made by readers online and comments made in letters published on valleyindy.org. And at the end of the day, many public officials don't like to be criticized. And they don't like that the Valley Indy provides a place where residents can do that. Dan and I touch upon that a little bit as well. Okay, so back to this Derby issue. Here's some more specific background on it. As you may or may not know, the city of Derby is in the process of changing its charter. A bipartisan group of appointed volunteers have been working for months to suggest changes, and some of those suggestions will be decided on by Derby voters in November. But this podcast is not about charter revision, but an issue connected to charter revision. A resident, like I had said, written several emails to Derby City Hall alleging the composition of that commission, the Charter Revision Commission, violates state law, according to this resident. The law, by the way, says you can't have more than a third of the commission be elected officials. The resident says that the number of elected officials exceeds state guidelines. However, the Derby Corporation Council says the resident's wrong. He points out she's counting 2 political party leaders who serve on the commission as holding public office. Derby's Corporation Council said local political party leaders, although chosen by members of their own party, are not considered to be public office holders. Corporation Council also provided a court case that he said backs up his researched legal opinion. And by the way, I reached out to 2 other lawyers independent of this. They both said Derby's Corporation Council is 100% in the right as it pertains to the members of this commission. Just a FYI for people. But the resident disagreed and threatened to issue the city a cease and desist order. She emailed her complaints to the press, and the city's Corporation Council responded with a reply all, which also went to the media outlets. He pointed out that the resident failed to share his letter explaining to her his research on this particular issue and cautioned her about publishing what he characterized as false statements. Quote, "You are hereby warned that any further publication of your inaccurate and false statements by you or by any third party will be injurious to me, Mr. Backlick, Mr. Garofalo, Mayor Zinkin, and other Derby public officials, and will result in legal action being commenced against you and any third party publishing your inaccurate and false statements, the Corporation Counsel said in the email. So my question was, is there justification for this? Can a government official make a statement like that to a private citizen? Is it justified? First, I'll play for you more comments from the Derby Corporation Counsel's take on this matter, as he explained to the Derby Charter Revision Commission last month. I really need some water. Might have to pause this. Please keep in mind this audio is from Zoom, okay? So it's not perfect. It's you have to listen closely. Also, the clip's long. It's about 5 minutes long, but I'm not editing it, nor will I comment on it while it plays, because it gives the city the chance to address its side of this issue. So let me just bring it up on the old Rodecaster Pro that I have. Here is Derby's Corporation Counsel explaining this issue to the Derby Charter Revision Commission in late August.
Before we begin, if I could just have a couple minutes to give everyone, bring everyone up to speed on the emails that I copied you on over the last 24 hours. I just want to make sure that, again, everyone's hearing it directly from me as Corporation Counsel rather than actually out on the street. It's not a matter of conversation. It's just a matter of report. If anyone has any specific questions, I would ask them just to be limited because I don't think it's really much to talk about. But there was a constituent who had issues. I don't know what her issues were specifically, but originally the individual had served the city with freedom of information requesting the names, addresses, telephone numbers of all boards and commissions in the city, including town committee, the two town committees. And that information was provided to the best of our ability. The city does not maintain the specific list that she was looking for, but to the extent she was entitled to information, I gave her what she was entitled to. After I provided that to her, she submitted a letter to the city where she basically took the position that this body was illegally constituted because by statute, no more than 1/3 of the membership of this body can be held by anyone who holds any other public office. And she took the position that any other public office included being a member of the two town committees. So therefore, if she were correct, there would be more than 1/3 of the membership being of holding any other public office. I received her letter. I read her letter. I researched her letter. I read case law on the issue, found a case that was on, as close to on point as I could. This really comes down to a question of statutory construction and what did the legislature intend. But if you followed along in my response, in my opinion, town committee members are not public officers for purposes of individuals holding public office. They are not elected by the general population. They are elected in accordance with specific party rules. They have no authority other than to take action in accordance with their party party rules, and that's the limitation. And like the judge said in the decision that I forwarded to the individual with my opinion, there's nothing to suggest in the statute anywhere that these individuals would be public officials. So I warned her not to bring frivolous lawsuits in the court, which would cost the city money. And as of this moment in time, I have not received a writ summons and complaint. But what she did, claiming she had not yet reviewed my email, she sent her letter to the press. So I received that last night. I did not want to wait till the morning. I wanted to get out ahead of it because I wanted to put the press on notice that it was my position that the information contained in her letter was inaccurate. And the way that defamation laws work against public officials is the press would be protected if they published something in good faith. So if they did not have reason to know the falsity of the information. So I wanted to put everyone on notice that I had already provided a response letter indicating that the individual's position was inaccurate and that the statements contained therein were false and they were impugning the integrity of city officials. And that she was now acting with a reckless disregard for the truth, and she was, basically putting herself in jeopardy. We then, she claimed what she claimed, and I sent my final response where I said, this is not a game. This is of debate and discussion. As Corporation Counsel in the city of Derby, I have the final say on all matters that involve the law, and only a court can reverse my opinion. So unless and until a court does, that's my opinion. But I believe that my opinion is well grounded in the law and in the facts before. So that's where we are. I do understand that she may have posted on Facebook. My suggestion is no one should be engaging in a dialogue on this matter. There's nothing to be gained from it. And basically my position at this moment, in which is really simplified in my final email, will just stand for itself. And if she files a lawsuit, we'll deal with it. But again, as of this moment, I'm unaware of it. And unless anyone has any questions, I would just ask Mark to draw us to our first.
Okay, so that was, I almost said Ansonia, Derby Corporation Counsel Vin Marino, bringing the Charter Revision Commission up to speed on this issue. So, naturally, the first thing I'm doing now is engaging in further dialogue on this issue, because I was curious after everything that transpired, including that summary of what's going on. Well, how much can the public criticize its government before you get a warning that legal action can be taken? And the Valley Indy is a third party. What does that mean for me? So I called up Dan Barrett at the American Civil Liberties Union. He's their legal director. And here is my interview with Dan from Friday, August 28th. There was a lag in getting it online because the news has been the news in the Valley. So this is a little late, but here's Dan.
Sure, that's fine.
All right. So joining me on the phone, and I'm very interested in talking to him, is actually someone who knows about this issue, an expert, as opposed to me just babbling on. Joining me is Dan Barrett, and he's the legal director for the Connecticut ACLU. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I had reached out to the ACLU about this issue ongoing in the city of Derby, where basically the city's corporation counsel in an email had warned a resident about possibly perpetuating what the government, the Mayor Zekin's administration had characterized as perhaps false information. Without going too into the weeds. And I thought it would be worth having Mr. Barrett on to talk about, well, what are the limits? Because I was under the impression it's the First Amendment and the public has a right to criticize their government. We all know the phrase "throw the bums out." I mean, Dan, if I say "throw the bums out," can I expect a letter from a corporation counsel warning me that I might get sued if I say that too often?
I sure hope not. I think there's two ways of looking at the situation, and one is through a legal lens, and number two is just through a sort of healthy democracy lens. And to take the latter first, it seems to me that sure, and anytime a municipality is debating a policy change, a charter review, an ordinance, really anything that reflects a municipality's policy, that it makes sense to leave a wide open space for voters and residents in that municipality to voice their opinions. Now, their opinions can range from interesting and insightful to, a waste of time, to unhinged, all the way up to new information that elected officials did not previously know. And in that sense, it makes a lot of sense to leave the floor wide open so that everyone can voice their opinions. And elected officials, of course, are free to pick and choose and decide, well, gee, that voter is telling me something that's important and I should listen to, or that voter is voicing an opinion that I don't agree with and I'm not going to act on. As elected officials, Connecticut municipal officers are expected to be able to filter the wheat from the chaff, to pay attention to their constituents. It seems like an unnecessary exercise to give people legalistic warnings that are effectively going to convince, if not the speaker, then some other folks in the community, maybe it's best not to speak up.
Now, the fact that I was looking at the Derby Derby Corporation Counsel's email in response to this letter, there was a back and forth in a bunch of emails, and he had said, the Corporation Counsel, you're hereby warned that any further publication of your inaccurate and false statements by you or by any third party will be injurious to me, Mr. Back, and a bunch of city officials, will result in legal action being commenced against you. Have you ever heard of that happening with something like this? Are there cases where, I guess I'm trying to say, like, do you agree that, all right, maybe that's not good government to say that? Maybe that's not exactly encouraging, the exchange of ideas, but was Mr. Marino in his right to send an email like that? Could he have a case?
Well, the law sort of breaks down two ways when we're talking about this area of the law is called defamation, and so that is a private lawsuit in which a person accuses the other of effectively impugning their character in front of other people, and the guarantee that limits the reach of defamation is, of course, the First Amendment right to free speech, and also our state constitutional guarantees to free speech. We have similar but slightly different guarantees in our state constitution. There's two provisions that address this. And when it comes to these types of situations in which a person is warning or threatening or making a claim that they have been defamed, the law is going to look at two things, and that is opinion versus fact. So as a first threshold question, if the person is the alleged defamer is making public their opinion about an elected official, there's a pretty tough sledding when it comes to filing a lawsuit against that person. For the first part, a person's opinion about how the government is conducting its activities is pretty much off limits from a defamation suit. As you say, throw the bums out. It is, was, and probably forever will be a lawful thing for the American public to say about their elected officials and about government agencies. The second is that public officials themselves, even if the information were, factual and not opinion-based, they've got a pretty tough row to hoe because they are public officials. A person who has run for office or accepted appointment to an office, they are presumed under the law to put up with some of the cut and thrust of politics and to have people make statements about the way they're performing their jobs in ways that maybe a private citizen wouldn't find to be acceptable. So those things are really tough. If it came to fact, on the other hand, the person is making a representation about fact, that's a different matter. For example, saying, this person engages in the following behavior in their private life. That's something different. It's not clear to me how much of that was that issue in the Derby situation as opposed to the person's opinion about, number one, the way the government's performing its job, doing this charter revision, and number two, about the state of the law, which is really something that from the beginning of Connecticut as a state, its citizens have debated publicly and been accustomed to debating. Now, of course, their opinions on the law may be wrong, or they may be the ones that don't ultimately prevail, but that doesn't rob them of the ability to express an opinion about what the law is.
And one thing as a editor and reporter and the guy who takes out the garbage at a very small news organization in Connecticut, I always sort of get PTSD at this point when the elections roll around because I accept letters to the editor. And invariably, I will get phone calls from public officials who either point out, well, something isn't entirely accurate in that letter, or they just don't like the tone that the letter writer has taken, and invariably I'm threatened, or it's insinuated, perhaps not on the record, that I'll get sued for libel in that matter. If I'm elected, and usually I respond, I have a letters to the editor policy where I cite the New York Times case, I guess from 1964, that says public officials don't, there's a higher bar. People are allowed to criticize you, which is essentially, I think, what you just just said. But are public officials taught this when they take office in any way? Is there any training? Like, does the ACLU, could they come to a municipality and say, like, here's the facts on libel and slander? Part of the job is that you're going to get criticized.
Well, we don't, in part because we expect that anyone who puts their hat in the ring to be a public official has an obligation to learn what the law is, and not just with respect to free speech, but with a variety of other areas. For example, we expect municipal officials to understand their role in lawmaking, the extent of their authority, and that sort of thing. We can't go around training all the municipal officials in no small part because we don't have the resources for it, but we do expect that they would seek education on their own as to the limits of the law with respect to this or any other question. So if they wonder, what's my bonding authority or anything like that, they're under the obligation to figure that out on their own and to make best efforts to comply with the law. Now, when it comes to threatening newspapers for reprinting letters to the editor, it's an even tougher slog for an elected official. The main reason being that newspapers have what's usually called a reporting or a fair reporting privilege. And so if the newspaper reprints the letter, it's garden variety, sort of, I think the mayor's a bum, that sort of stuff, as long as the newspaper is not altering the contents of the letter, then it's not really the newspaper's problem. Now, if the newspaper publishes a news story repeating the person's charges as if they were fact without having investigated them, that's a different question. But when the newspaper is operating, this community service of letting people write in and express their opinions to their neighbors, I wish an elected official luck at trying to get a newspaper on the hook for the opinions of the letter writer. It's a tough row to hoe. And then you have the optics of it, which is elected officials in Connecticut have a lot to do. They're pretty busy, and you have to wonder about a person who wants to devote a lot of time into basically sparring with a single voter, when it might make more sense to just make the case to the public that the position that the elected official wants is the right one, or the one that makes most sense for their municipality.
And then sort of doubling back to this Derby issue, I'm a website. The Valley Indy is a website where people can use Facebook to comment on the site. And I thought it was interesting. Charles Sampson, who is an elected member of the Board of Aldermen, he weighed in on this issue of, the battling of the letters, the Corporation Council representing the administration versus this single Derby resident who had an opinion different than the administration. And he said, Mr. Sampson sort of, and I hear this a lot from public officials on the hyper-local level, well, there's so much misinformation in the community. How do we get a handle on this misinformation? And he says in his statement, the taxpayer pressed several inaccurate issues through letters and emails to the administration and Corporation Council. So there's apparently other messages between this taxpayer and the administration that I'm and the public are not privy to, and then forwarded them to the news meter after being informed several times of their inaccuracies. And he says, at some point, we must draw the line with people to let them know that their concerns are noted, yet their less than accurate innuendos must stop. As sort of justification for the Corporation Council sending this letter. Does that sound right to you? Is that sort of past the municipal government smell test? And in terms of libel and slander and the things that we're talking about here?
Well, depending on, at the extreme, I guess I'm going to disappoint you in that, like a lawyer, almost every legal question, a very good answer might be, it depends. Now, if we're talking about a bona fide dispute over policy where some person, really has a bone and they really want to run it to the ground, where they're saying, I really think this violates X, Y, and Z, there's a point at which municipal officials are perfectly free to say, well, gee, I think you're wrong, and I'm not going to respond to any further communications with you on this subject. I imagine that happens quite a lot in Connecticut. That doesn't necessarily make the communications defamatory, nor would something in the order of, like a citizen writing and saying, I think you're violating the law for the following reasons, and it turns out that, the opinion of the law that the citizen has is either not right or is a minority opinion that the courts have not recognized. But that is just that's the nature of democracy. Now, on the other end, on the most extreme version of the spectrum, you can imagine a situation in which a person is writing to the public, making public, let's say, wild factual accusations about an elected official. Things that the person absolutely knows are not true and are completely outrageous. There's at the absolute end, there is a kernel of actionable stuff on that end, but it's, pretty rare. And I think that oftentimes elected officials view an allegation that they are not following the law or that they're not good at their jobs as a personal attack, when the reality is that's simply part of politics. I mean, I think when the first humans on Earth organized their the very first form of representative government, approximately 7 seconds after electing their leader, somebody had a gripe with that leader. That is the way it works. And so if the dispute in Derby is simply overlook, the charter revision is wrong, you've gone about it wrong, you're wrong in the law, that seems to me just like the garden variety nature of politics. And if people are taking offense at it, I don't know what to suggest to them. But people typically, not necessarily the letter writer who might be quite intent on expressing their opinion, but it makes us a little nervous at the ACLU when municipalities are warning people that they could be sued. It tends to disrupt the participation of folks in government, which is what we really need to happen. I mean, look at our voting rates. We need them to improve. We need people that come to city council meetings, even if it's only by Zoom, and really engage in their own governance.
And this is my last question. I cover the lower Naugatuck Valley, and I've been here for 11 years, and I probably had 10 years before that in the Danbury area, and then going into New York. I'm not sure I've ever seen an attorney for municipality include a statement like this in an email warning a resident, hey, watch it, we have legal rights we can use. Is this something that is that you're hearing more about by any chance in Connecticut or in general?
No, not so much. I mean, the issue arises occasionally, and I should say that I know as much about the dispute as I have seen coverage of. So there may be other letters that the parties have exchanged that no one's seen. Heaven knows.
Right.
But what I have seen, and I think what is fairly routine, is for municipal officials to take job performance criticism as if it is aimed at a moral failing. And so you see that across the board in Connecticut. For example, you see now, for the last few years, there's been a huge dispute over whether the way in which police employees perform their job can be open to public scrutiny. And police employees tend to view it as information that's intensely private and embarrassing. The reality is how they do their jobs on the taxpayer's dime is in no way private and is not embarrassing. It's simply a reflection of how they decided to do their job that day. And so oftentimes there's a very natural human temptation for people in government to view criticism as aimed at the core of who they are, when the reality is it's about their job performance. And in a democracy, it's extremely important for people to be able to air those. Now, a person may make criticisms in public and their fellow neighbors and voters decide, well, I think that person's off base. Mm-hmm. Or they could decide, oh, that person's got a great point, I'm going to vote a different way. But that's all in the nature of democracy. If people are addressing the way the government's doing its job, the way that the government is adhering to the law or not, that's the very nature of what Connecticut's about.
All right, sir, those are all my questions. I want to thank you first for coming on just a few hours' notice. And like you said, I should also point out that Mr. Barrett is commenting on just my article and some documents I sent. So that is important to point out for both of us, I guess. But with that being said, I want to thank you, and I wish you a good day.
You too, Eugene. Great to hear from you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
For hundreds of years, we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Our readers are in the opens each day. Online clickbait a prurient way. It's free information here to stay. Not even hookers give it away. Advertising, metastasizing, newsroom shrinking, constant attrition. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. Dinosaur. Deadlines, bylines, pictures too. An editorial comment for a buck or two. Fire down the block, the murder next door. And now we wonder what it's all for. Social media coming free to your funny pages. The mayor's wages, criminal seats, corruption schemes, ink stain wretches asking tough questions. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. The presses are running all through the night. We're printing the truth with all of our might. We're platform agnostics, got that interweb too. Buy an ad, see what we can do. We still have subscribers, still have our fans. We're here every day, so give us a chance and we'll make an art stand. Just hold us in your hand and we'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Dinosaur.